Eau Claire, Wisconsin, a city of rivers, railroads, and rolling hills, a place where people still nod to each other on the street. But beneath the surface of this friendly Midwestern town are stories. Stories that never made national headlines, and stories that never got closure. People vanished, bodies were found with no answers, and in some cases, no names at all. Tonight, we look at 4 real cases, 4 lives that ended in mystery, and all of them here in the heart of the Chippewa Valley of Wisconsin. This is the Midnight Mystery Archive. I'm Kevin, and this is Vanished in the Valley, the Unsolved Stories of Eau Claire. It was Saturday night, November 3rd, 2018, homecoming weekend in Eau Claire. A chill was setting in the air, the kind that makes breath curl in the light of street lamps. Downtown was alive, bars full, students celebrating, and music drifting through the cold air. Among the crowd was 28-year-old James Liedtka, a U.S. Army veteran, a student at UW-Stout, and a well-known face around Eau Claire. He'd served his country. Now he was building a future, back in school and reconnecting with old friends. That night, he was bar hopping with a small group, a routine Saturday for a lot of people in town. Around 1:15 a.m., James was seen leaving Scooter's Bar on Water Street. Surveillance footage would later confirm that he exited the bar alone, wearing a gray jacket, blue jeans, a ball cap, and carrying his phone. It wasn't unusual. Friends said James had a habit of heading out before the rest of the group. He was independent, clear-headed, the kind of guy who didn't need babysitting. But that night, something was different, because James Liedtka never made it home. By Sunday morning, friends were texting him. By the afternoon, calls were going straight to voicemail. At first, people assumed he was hungover, sleeping it off, but by Monday, he hadn't checked in with family or appeared in class. And that's when worry turned into fear. A missing persons report was filed, and the Eau Claire police began searching the downtown area. Flyers went up. Local media picked up the story. James' last cell phone ping placed him somewhere near the Chippewa River, not far from the bar where he was last seen. The Chippewa River has a reputation, a combination of beauty and dangerous. It's not the first time someone had gone missing near those banks. The trail along the water is winding and dimly lit, especially in November. If someone stumbled, if they were alone, tired, or disoriented, the river could take them very quickly and very quietly. Dive teams were brought in. Search dogs traced James's scent to the water's edge, but not beyond. On November 15th, nearly 12 days after he disappeared, searchers found James Liedtka's body in the Chippewa River. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as a cold water drowning, with alcohol as a contributing factor. Officially, it was ruled accidental. But for James's family and friends, that explanation felt far too simple. James was a veteran, strong, mentally sharp, familiar with the downtown area, and the night he went missing, he hadn't expressed any distress. Why did no one else see him fall in? How did he vanish from a street just blocks from busy bars and late-night pizza shops? Some in the community whispered about foul play, wondering if James had been followed, pushed, or if something else had happened that no one wanted to speak about. But there was no evidence. just growing unease. A memorial was held on the UW campus. Friends left flowers by the river trail. His family thanked the community, but they never stopped asking why. James was more than a student, his sister said at a vigil. He was a friend, a brother, a fighter, and we deserve to know what really happened to him. His death may have been ruled an accident, but the silence around it still feels heavy. James Liedtka was one of many lost to the Chippewa River, but unlike others, he was known, loved, and full of purpose. His death remains an ache, not just for his family, but for a town that's still asking, what happened that night? And as we move through the stories in this episode, James is just one thread in a tapestry of loss. Up next, a woman found murdered in her home in 2001, and more than 2 decades later, no one has been held responsible. This is the story of Angelina Wall. Eau Claire, Wisconsin, January 6, 2001. A Saturday afternoon, cold, still uneventful, until police were called to a home on the city's south side. Inside, they found 31-year-old Angelina Wall dead. Her body and the scene told a story of violence. And more than 20 years later, no one has been arrested for her murder. Angelina was found by a relative who hadn't been able to reach her by phone. When they arrived at her home on Grover Road, they knew something was wrong. The door was unlocked, the house was silent, and inside the signs were immediate. Angelina had been beaten, possibly strangled. There was no sign of forced entry, nothing seemed stolen, no defensive wounds were ever confirmed. Eau Claire police opened a homicide investigation, but from the beginning they faced a puzzle. There were no eyewitnesses, no sounds of a struggle. Neighbors said they hadn't seen anything unusual. And unlike other cases, this one didn't fit a pattern. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't a lover's quarrel. It was sudden, quiet, intimate. Over the weeks and months that followed, police interviewed family, friends, co-workers. They looked at phone records, canvassed the area again, but nothing stuck. No charges were filed, and slowly the case went cold. But for those who knew Angelina, friends, relatives, even those in the community, there was always a sense that someone out there knew what happened, that someone had been in that house and walked away. Angelina was 31 years old. She was working, living a quiet life, described by friends as warm, shy, and steady. There's no record of threats, no public disputes, nothing to suggest that she was in danger. And maybe that's what makes it harder. She didn't live the kind of life that led to trouble. But sometimes trouble doesn't knock. Sometimes it just walks right in. As the years passed, Angelina's name faded from the headlines. The story didn't draw national attention. There was no viral campaign, just a quiet death and a family still asking why. Her murder remains one of Eau Claire's most frustrating cold cases, a puzzle with missing pieces and no clear motive. What do you do with an unsolved murder? How do you grieve when justice never arrives? Angelina Wall's case sits in the silence between headlines. And in this episode, she is not alone. Up next, a murder happened in broad daylight, in a house for sale, and still no one knows who did it. That's the strange case of Richard Scott. It was March 1st, 1980, in the town of Wheaton, just north of Eau Claire. A cold but clear afternoon in rural Chippewa County. That day, 36-year-old Richard Scott, a local real estate agent, had an appointment to show a home on County Highway T. He arrived sometime in the early afternoon. He never left. When a co-worker realized Richard hadn't returned to the office or called in, they went to check the property. Inside, they found him. Richard had been stabbed multiple times. He died at the scene. The house, empty on the market, showed no signs of forced entry. No robbery, no struggle. Just a man murdered in broad daylight for reasons no one could explain. Richard had no known enemies. He was respected in the community, married, a father, a familiar face in Eau Claire's real estate circles. He'd shown homes hundreds of times. No problems and no complaints. Yet on that March afternoon, he likely thought it was just another house on the list, when in reality it was something much darker. Someone, perhaps a client, perhaps a stranger, used that showing to end his life. Authorities interviewed colleagues, former clients, neighbors. They checked license plates, phone calls, open house lists, but no arrests were made. No clear suspect ever emerged. One theory was that the killer had posed as a buyer, using the anonymity of the job to set a trap. Another, a personal grudge kept carefully hidden. But without evidence, nothing stuck. Richard's case is unusual because of its setting. Most unsolved homicides in the area happen under cover of night in private. But this was midday, a scheduled appointment, a murder committed in what should have been a safe, routine workplace. And the message it sent rippled across the region. If this could happen to a respected professional in broad daylight, who else was at risk? For decades, Richard's family has waited, hoped, wondered. It doesn't make sense, a former coworker once said. Not with how careful he was, not with who he was. To this day, the house where he died stands. And though ownership has changed, the story lingers like a shadow in the hallway. A reminder that not all homes are empty when the lights go out. Richard Scott's murder remains unsolved nearly 45 years later. It is still an open case, still without a name. But what happens when even a name is missing? When a body is found and no one knows who they were? Next, in our final story, a suitcase, a skull, and the mystery of a woman no one has come forward to claim. October 14th, 2020. In a remote area north of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, something unusual caught the eye of a passerby. On a vacant farm property in the town of Wheaton, an abandoned suitcase sat by an old structure, left, it seemed, with purpose. When deputies arrived, they opened the case. What they found inside was a human skull, and with it, a mystery no one was expecting. Inside the purple suitcase were the remains of a woman. Investigators estimated her age between 25 and 35 years old. She had black hair, her height likely between 5 foot and 5'5". She'd likely been deceased for several months and maybe more. But there was more. She was clothed, black leggings and a black t-shirt from Sprecker's Restaurant and Pub, a popular Milwaukee area chain. There were no ID cards, no wallet, no driver's license, just a woman, stuffed in a suitcase and discarded like trash. The Chippewa County Sheriff's Office reached out to state and national missing persons databases. Facial reconstruction was attempted. DNA was submitted to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. They checked tattoo shops, restaurants, hospitals. They asked nearby counties if any missing persons matched the description. Nothing matched. Some believe she may have been from out of state, perhaps Chicago or the northern Chicago suburbs. The Sprecher's t-shirt was unique. It wasn't widely distributed, possibly from a staff uniform or a private event. Was she trafficked? Killed by someone she knew? Or part of a wider web of transient victims left unclaimed across rural America? We don't know, because we don't even know her name. To die is tragic, but to die and be forgotten, that's something else entirely. For nearly 4 years now, she has remained Jane Doe. No one arrested, no cause of death released. Her body laid to rest, but her story still waiting to be written. Someone out there knew her, ate with her, laughed with her. Someone out there is pretending they don't know what happened. 4 stories, 4 tragedies, a missing student, a murdered woman, a father never returned, and a stranger with no name. This is Eau Claire, quiet, beautiful, and haunted. These are its mysteries, local, unsolved, and real. We tell these stories not just to remember, but to remind that justice delayed is not always justice denied, and that in the silence someone may still be listening. This has been the Midnight Mystery Archive. I'm Kevin. Thank you for joining us tonight as we reopen the shadows cast over Eau Claire. Until next time. As always, thank you for tuning in to the Midnight Mystery Archive. You can find us on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.